This is May 1st, May Day 2006. Our oral history interviewee today is J.R. Thompson. I'm Chuck Lundquist. We're delighted to have you here. We usually start off, since this is a historical collection, by letting you tell a little bit about where you spent your youth, where you got educated, and how you got into the space program.
Okay, well, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to come this morning. I was born in Greenville, South Carolina, but spent the majority part of my youth in Atlanta, Georgia. I attended Druid Hills High School. At that time, I think I was a typical teenager, enjoyed sports and that kind of thing. I wasn't that good of a student. I went to, after I graduated from high school, with probably nondescript grades. My dad had graduated from Georgia Tech and indicated he'd like to give me a shot to go there, but he wasn't very hopeful that I'd be able to make it. But anyway, I buckled down at that time and got through Georgia Tech and majored in aeronautical engineering. Back at that time, I thought at least I had an interest, probably more in the aircraft industry. Wasn't so much thinking about space. While I was at Georgia Tech, though, walking down Peachtree Street one evening.
The only street to walk down it.
Well, that's true. There was a crowd at a drugstore, and they were all listening to the radio, and they heard the beep of Sputnik. And I think I was probably a junior at Georgia Tech at that time, and so I got quite interested in that. Still didn't know much about it. Graduated from Georgia Tech in '58. Had a 2-year obligation to the United States Navy. I was an ROTC student at Tech. Served the 2 years in the Navy, and then I went down to Pratt & Whitney in West Palm Beach, Florida, and worked on J-58, which was one of their newer propulsion development systems at that time. And then while I was there, I became involved in the RL-10, the U.S.'s first liquid hydrogen engine at that time, I recall. So I got somewhat interested in the space program, but more in the propulsion technology at that time. And then through a classmate at Georgia Tech, I was enticed to submit an application for NASA up in Huntsville, Alabama. And in 1961, I believe, I left Pratt & Whitney. As a matter of fact, it was the day that President Kennedy was assassinated. I remember the announcement coming over the company speaker system just about as I was leaving. So my wife and I at that time and 2 small children, we drove up to Huntsville in a Ford station wagon that didn't have a radio, and we spent a lot of time stopping, trying to catch up on the news of the assassination. At that time, we didn't know that he had passed on. But anyway, that's a little bit of the background as to how I got. I came into the Marshall Space Flight Center, worked at the old Hick building. Was in the back then we had units. I was in a section in a unit over in the old Hick building in the propulsion division that was a part of the old P&VE laboratory. And got
Who was
very...
the head of the lab at that time?
Hans Paul, no, he was division chief, I believe. Hans Paul, Jim Long was the fellow that encouraged me to apply for NASA. And then we stayed at the Hick building for a couple of years, as I recall, and then moved on out to Marshall.
So you got to Marshall 1 year after it was created, more or less.
Yes, I got there in December of '61, and stayed there through April of '83.
A lot of things happened.
A lot of history, and enjoyed it thoroughly, and was fortunate enough to work on the Apollo program, the Saturn, the engines, specifically the J2, a little bit of the F1. Worked on at that time what we call the simplified J2, the J2S, and then came up through the ranks, so to speak, in the propulsion area. And then after Apollo, I worked for several years on Skylab.
Well, where were you when the Apollo landing took place on the moon?
I was out at Marshall, and here leading up to that, I spent a lot of time out at Rocketdyne, overseeing some of the testing out there and getting involved with a lot of their propulsion people on a lot of the requirements and that kind of thing, just supporting the development activity.
So you were in Huntsville or at the Cape for the launch?
No, I was in Huntsville at the Cape, and remember it vividly. And then, of course, when that program wound down, as I mentioned, I went to work still in the old P&VE on Skylab. This was back; they were trying to establish a new area. It was manned system integration or something like that. It was to provide the liaison and the coordination with the people down at Johnson, and had a lot of involvement with a number of the astronauts. And that's where I met and got to be good friends with Dick Truly, who later on I got to know well during the Shuttle program. And then after Skylab, I was given an opportunity by Rocco Petrone to become the manager of the Space Shuttle main engine.
And you say a few words about Rocco. He was an interesting character, I believe.
Very much so. He, I got to know him somewhat, primarily in the nighttime or the evenings during the Skylab repair, where we were working on that. I always had the perception that Rocco slept during the day. And then at night, he'd come out to the center when he was center director and oversee all the work that was ongoing there. And I'm sure he was in at daytime too, but I always saw him at night. He seemed to patrol all the test area and the labs, and was very influential in providing leadership to establish that repair and allow us to go on and complete a fully successful Skylab program with crews of 30, 60, and 90 days. So it was an exciting time, and Rocco was a tough guy. I mean, he didn't tolerate foolishness, and he always expected you to be well prepared and to know what you were talking about. And so after that experience, he picked me to head up the the Space Shuttle main engine program in May of 1974, I believe.
That was surely a challenge.
That was a challenge, and it was a tough time back then. We had a hard time getting the engine program moving along. I think our first engine test wasn't until probably late 1975, and then we spent from that time through April the 12th, the first shuttle launch of 81, and going through all the development phases and the verification and the qualification. And it was a tough time, but it was a very rewarding time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Was associated with a lot of fine people that contributed to the program. Dom Sankini out at Rocketdyne. Literally thousands of people out there worked on it, and of course the support of all the people at Marshall in the laboratories there. All paid a major contribution to not only the development of the Space Shuttle main engine, but also to the other elements of the shuttle. And we had a highly successful first flight and went on to a series of other flights. Then I left Marshall in April of '83 and went up to Princeton University for several years and ran with along with Harold Firth the fusion program up there at the Princeton lab.
Can you say a little more about that? That's been a on and off again program for the U.S. for a long time.
Well, this was I went there kind of at the heyday of the fusion program. The Department of Energy, and back then it was Jimmy Carter. We were engaged in long gas lines and that kind of thing, and the country was starting to put a substantial investment in fusion power, and the work done at Princeton involved the tokamak, the toroidal system. And it was a successful program. Went on to make as much power as was used, called break even. But after several years there, the program started to wind down some. It's still ongoing now, and I think there's probably even a renewed interest in fusion energy today, certainly nuclear energy. I had a lot of good times there, a lot of old friends, and enjoyed it very much. But I was there at the time of the Challenger accident, and Jim Fletcher was back at NASA at that time and asked me to take a leave of absence from Princeton and come back and head up the NASA task force down at the Cape.
That was surely a very difficult job.
Yes, it was, working for Dick Truly to work with the Rogers Commission into the data inquiry as to exactly what happened. But it was a tough time for all involved. After my stint there, which was about 2 or 3 months, as I recall, then I returned to Princeton, and in September, I believe, of '86, Jim Fletcher again asked me to come back and head up the Marshall Space Flight Center, which I did, and rejoined the Marshall team in September of '86. Stayed there through, I believe, '89 when the first George Bush appointed me the deputy administrator, and then I went to Washington and worked with Dick Truly, who was the administrator.
What were the highlights that you can remember of your term as center director at Marshall?
Well, at Marshall, I came in a very trying time. It was a team that was looking for a lift. At the time, we were just coming out of the aftermath of the Challenger accident, had a very major task to get the solid rocket motor fixed, and that was accomplished by a redesign of the joint that had failed. Morale very quickly picked up. It was very rewarding to me personally to see the whole team pull together and come out of that, and it wasn't just in the solid rocket motor area. At that time, we spent about a year relooking at everything that was involved in the shuttle systems, all aspects of the propulsion units or elements. Reinvigorated the test program. Just went through a couple of years of a very demanding testing, and afterward it proved itself. I think there were a number of highly successful flights after that, and then in '89, as I mentioned, went on to headquarters.
Who was your deputy when you were director at Marshall, and what other key staff people did you have?
Basically, Bill Lucas's team was intact. Jack Lee was still a deputy. Woody Bethea was there for a while. Shortly after that, I believe Jim Kingsbury retired. Bob Lindstrom had, I believe, retired right before then and gone on, retired and then eventually went to work with Thiokol. Bob Swinghammer was there. Alex McCool, George Hobson, George McDonough, Bill Horton. George Hardy retired at about the time I came, as I recall. But a lot of the
familiar names.
A lot of the names that were still around, the names that were involved and responsible for developing all of the shuttle elements the first time. So I had a tremendous team and enjoyed working with all of them.
Well, then you went to NASA headquarters. And you tell a little bit about that experience.
Yes, I went in the spring of '89, I think, and stayed there through the end of '91. At that time, I was about 55 or so, and wanted, probably had one more cycle in me, and wanted to spend a little bit of time in industry. I eventually joined Orbital Sciences, who focused on the smaller systems and launches and spacecraft.
What were the highlights of the time you were at NASA headquarters, or what
Well, the launch of
there do you remember that were interesting?
The launch of the Hubble Space Telescope and the aftermath of that, learning to our disappointment that the lens was basically backward, and but typically NASA, when they've got a tough job, they had the wherewithal to fix it. and a lot of focus on the shuttle when I was up there. I think there were probably 25 or 30 flights conducted while I was there.
See, who was the administrator then?
Dick Truly,
Dick Truly, that's right.
who I remembered and had met back in the early days of
Can you
Skyway.
comment a little bit about him for the historical record?
Well, Dick was a good friend, and he was I thought he did a fine job. He was very disciplined, very much focused on the shuttle. He understood, I think, some of the problems with it, but I think did a great job in leading the agency, in returning the agency back to flight status after the accident. I just had a lot of good memories up there. I enjoyed it very much.
Well, then you went on to orbital sciences.
Yes, and I'm still there today.
Oh, tell us about your experiences there.
I've been there now 16 years. I went in as Chief Technical Officer. Then I became General Manager of the Launch Systems Group. Spent a lot of time in Phoenix or Chandler, Arizona. And then in 1990, I became President and Chief Operating Officer and Vice Chairman. And I remain in that role today. Orbital has grown quite a bit, conduct a lot of launches.
Started out by a couple of college students, as I remember the history.
3 college students. 2 are still on our board. One is the CEO, David Thompson. The company now provides the interceptors for the Missile Defense Agency. So it's grown quite a bit in terms of the responsible systems that are involved in protecting the U.S. And that's a summary of.
It's been a growing company.
Yes, it has.
Oh, what thoughts do you have about the current NASA plans, the return to the moon and eventually Mars and so forth?
Well, I think it's a very challenging path that the president has laid out. I think it's doable. At least the first part of it is the return to the moon, but I'm not sure that it's sustainable. The country today has a lot of priorities. It's probably going to take a lot more money than is currently envisioned. It's going to be hard. I think there's a general attitude that we've done that. I say it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard politically to keep up the interest and the funding required in light of other pressures, Iraq, terrorism, other needs that the country has that are a high priority as well. So I'm not sure that it's sustainable, even with a Republican president in 2008. And certainly a Democrat may have other priorities. But it's a challenging, certainly a challenging time. I just hope NASA has the will to see it through. My view over the last 15 years is they tend to jump around quite a bit. They've stopped and started this something to follow the shuttle. That may or may not be the right thing to do, and that is retirement of the shuttle. I have a lot of fond memories of that program. I think I understand the argument for the retirement of it, but it's like the old wing walker. They didn't let loose on one hand until they had something else in the other. If they put in place plans now to retire the shuttle without having something, its replacement in hand, I see that can be quite a setback for the manned space program.
Yeah, the Russians, of course, have done things very differently. They've stayed with old designs and kept building them and using them. And do you have any feelings about the relative merits of the two approaches?
Well, I certainly see the merit of the incremental building block that they've used, as opposed to the U.S. It's taken a more radical departure from going from capsules to a reusable shuttle, and now going back to a capsule. Some would view the shuttle and the space station, as a matter of fact, have termed it a mistake. I don't view it that way at all. I think it's all part of our maturing in the space age or era. I just hope we have the wherewithal as a country to stick with it in whatever form it's in, and make it as safe as we can, although there will always be some risk, and continue to push the technology and the exploration. Programs like Hubble and other programs have shown us, given us a lot of insight into the origins of the heavens and how they all came about.
What would be your advice on what to do with the space station?
I don't know. I'm not that close to it now. I think, to be honest, I viewed it was a mistake to try to make it as big as it was and involve as many internationals as we did. I think once we started on that track, then it got too big, and it got ahead of itself in terms of how it could be used. And but anyway, now we're where we are, and I'm not sure what the plan is or how they're going to exploit it and use
I'm not sure anybody is.
Well,
It almost gets the feeling that NASA would like to give it to the international partners and be free of it.
Well, that could be. I somehow think that that it's a mistake for NASA to, this a little bit gets to what I said a little bit earlier. I worry at times that over the last 2 decades, the agency tends to jump around too much without following through on some of the programs. And it's that discontinuity that would trouble me some.
What advice would you have for young folks getting into the space program and joining NASA now?
Well, it's a very exciting field, a very challenging, it can be a very challenging endeavor. I would just hope that they would have the same opportunity that I had coming up and growing up in the Apollo program and Skylab and the development of the space shuttle. That's hard to beat, and so I just wish that they could be involved in the same type of programs.
Any final thoughts you'd like to put on the record?
No, it's been a real pleasure to work for the men and women at the Marshall Space Flight Center. Over the years, I've enjoyed it very much, and wish them continued success in the future.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Very good. Enjoyed it.